Hi. My name is Adrian Rinde. I work as a researcher at the Norwegian National Museum of Justice. And if you perhaps might be interested in some of the darker parts of Norwegian history, I highly recommend you come and visit us. We're located in Trondheim's old slavery building, which gradually was turned into Norway's first asylum for the criminally insane. And we have such joyful and uplifting exhibits, like the Executioner's exhibit, advanced axes and branding irons used by Norwegian executioners, and well, the evidence used in the Rinde trials, perhaps the most famous traitor cases here in Norway from World War II. We're a small museum with over 35,000 objects in our collection. And one day, one of my talented colleagues come running to me with a box from the collection, which you can see here. After my little talk, I'll open it up over here so you can see the objects yourself. And she said, Adrian, you're gonna love this. Okay, well, what does that mean? The last time something like this happened, you brought me a homemade masturbation machine that the police confiscated in the 70s after it electrocuted and killed its inventor. What on earth are we going to bring me today? Okay, so I get a little box and I open it up and there's a little note there. Confiscated objects taken from Vargvikernes' altar. What? Okay, so Vargvikernes from Bursum had an altar. Okay, this is a note, the only note we got from the now defunct police museum in Oslo. So of course I'm curious and I'm opening this box and I find this. A human skull with 666. If you can see the other side of it, you can see other tasteful decorations. And I didn't think it made much sense that this was taken from Vargvikernes. So, looking through some old photographs, and after a while I get access to the police records from the cases during the 90s. I can see that this is actually taken from Euronymous, Øystein Aarseth. It was on display in the record shop, Helvete. In addition to this skull, we found a book and some tarot cards. The book is Djevelen danser, The Devil is Dancing, Satanism, Magic, Occultism, written by Carl Milton Hartweit. During the early 90s, Hartweit became something like an expert on Satanism and occultism and did speaking tours for Norwegian radio and TV, but also at the Student Society here in Trondheim, for instance, where he spoke about the dangers of the Satanic youth culture. His background was as a teacher from the Steiner movement, anthroposophy, and his book includes an interview with Vargvikernes, which Varg was really unhappy about. According to Varg was never a Satanist. He used all of the satanic stuff as opposition to the status quo, opposition to Norway, opposition to Christianity, and so on. But he was really a National Socialist and a pagan in his own. Very interesting interpretation of paganism, which he shares with nobody else, of course. So when Carl Milton Hartweit called him and started asking him about occultism and Satanism, he tried to answer, but he didn't know anything about occultism and Satanism, according to Varg. So this book became a huge hit and started introducing a lot of people to this kind of subject. An interesting part is that Hartweit is very positive towards some pieces of occultism and esotericism, like theosophy, anthroposophy, what he calls white magic. That's good, that's like re-enchantment. It can help save us from the problems of modernity and secularization. But there are other things, black magic, Satanism, occultism, which is bad and shouldn't be treated with respect or in the sense that it's just a different religion, so you have freedom of thought and freedom of religion. No, this is a societal ill that has to be treated in the same way that you treat drugs, for instance. So you have to stop it. That's one of his points. We also found some tarot cards. These can be from Vargvikernes. The skull is from Euronymous. When I read through the police reports, most of the people that had objects confiscated from them during the early 90s got their tarot cards confiscated. So it could be from anyone. I think it might be from Vargvikernes. You can see he uses the Crowley tarot. The tarot that was painted by Lady Frida Harris according to instructions by the esotericist and occultist Aleister Crowley. And that makes sense, because Vargvikernes uses a lot of symbology in the early days that he steals from Crowley. For instance, the Star of Babylon and other things. So that might be it. In addition, I'd like to talk a little bit about the context here. We're going to use two specific primary sources. Number one, this is the confidential newspaper for the Oslo police. This is the one from 1991, where police lieutenant, a specific police lieutenant has been in the Netherlands for a specific police conference on satanic ritual abuse and black magic. And from there he comes back to Norway and he writes a 7 or 8 page article for the Oslo police on what is Satanism, what is black magic, and how do we, the police, fight it. He also enters with interviews in local tabloid press and starts talking about how there are satanic cults in Norway that are sexually abusing children. And the Oslo police know about 2 of these cults because they have an informant that is gradually remembering more and more from her time as a victim. And this is what we know as the start of the satanic panic in Norway. Other places it follows the same kind of pattern. There's always the focus on the satanic ritual abuse of children. It often starts in Christian communities, and it becomes mainstream through psychiatrists. In psychology, you have a period of time that they call the memory wars, and they start arguing about how does human memory work. And one of the positions was that it functions kind of like a hard drive. Like, if you have old memories in your hard drive, then a psychiatrist can help you through hypnosis and regression therapy to find these files that you thought you had deleted because of trauma or something else. And then they can bring these forth, and then you can realize that, your parents sexually abused you as a child. Now we know that that's not how memory works. That what these people actually did was psychiatrists were hypnotizing people and giving credibility to the fantasies that actually emerged when you were in dream states and in hypnotic states and were vulnerable, and signed that, okay, this is legitimate, this actually happened to you. And that's one of the things that stoked the fires of the satanic panic worldwide. That's how it started in Canada, that's how it spread to the United States and to England, and that's how it actually spread in Norway too, before the whole black metal community started showing up and giving us real Satanists to focus on too. So the police were terrified of actual Satanists and satanic cults showing up, and this was considered so mainstream that they actually wrote about it in their official newspapers. It's satanic holidays, satanic rituals, and so on. Another primary source we're going to have a look at is perhaps my favorite. Økokrim and Kripos, so the section for economic crimes and the section for special crimes in Norway, made this pamphlet, book, leaflet, called Church Burnings and Satanic Crimes. It was published in 1998, and it is a very interesting read. It is motivated by the fact that in Norway, in the early 90s, in a 5-year period, we had 47 church burnings, 2 murder cases, and of course a lot of vandalism cases connected to graveyards and so on. But this surprised me a lot, because the Special Crimes Unit produced this in '98. And then they distributed to different police offices in Norway, so that they had some background on how to prosecute, how to investigate, and so on, what they call satanic crimes and church burnings. And this is a glorious read. It starts, of course, with a description of what Satanism and occultism is, and they refuse to use any academic sources. They're much more comfortable with using police colleagues from the United States, which of course means satanic panic, that we get ideas that, yeah, Satanism, that's just inverted Christianity, it has existed forever, it is a societal ill, they're lurking around in corners and they are here to kidnap and eat your children. And we get glorious things like this. Situation from a satanic ritual. This is from 1998. Doesn't it strike you as more possible that this could be a photo shoot for something? It strikes me as odd. Remember, if this is distributed in 1998, it means that the police have access to this as perhaps their only source of knowledge on the subject in the early 2000s, perhaps. And we get instructions such as these. Reporting people who can be suspected of having connections to the black metal community, including names of bands, will be crucial in the effort of mapping the communities, including their growth and spread. Okay, so if you played in a Norwegian black metal band in the late 90s or early 2000s, you were probably on a list with Kripos somewhere. And if objects of a satanic character, whatever that means, are confiscated, these shall be reported to the Special Crimes Unit immediately. Okay, so they're taking this stuff pretty seriously then, even as late as the 90s. Let's look a bit more. Satanic holidays. Let's see. The 17th of January is a satanic party. It takes the character of a sexual party and involves the sexual use of young girls between 7 and 17. So watch your girls. The 20th of January is this night of St. Agnes, which is called a witch party, whatever that means. You sacrifice animals on the 25th of February, you drink blood of humans on the blood mass on March 1st. There's a sexual party on the common party day on the 20th of March. And so on. And of course, Corpus de Baal is on between 26th and 31st of April, and so on and so on. A lot of specific sacrifice dates and so on. All of this is taken specifically from police sources in the United States that are deeply involved in the satanic panic and nothing else. This has no historic background in actual occult traditions. It has no connection to actual satanic groups and worldviews and organizations. This is purely the fantasies of people that are out there scared of Satanists that are going to pop up and abuse their children. Another example. Behold, the most used occult symbols. You might recognize the A and foolishly think that that is the A from anarchy. Little do you know that this is an occult symbol deeply involved in Satanism. Same thing with whatever things in the bottom are. The cross of confusion, I've never seen that before. The black mass in the bottom right there. Anti-justice. Okay. have a master's degree in looking in occultism, you'd think that I'd seen some of the most used occult symbols before, but no. And this is specifically taken from work done by the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department. And that's what Norwegian police officers are using as authorities when they're looking at the black metal community in the late 90s and early 2000s. Okay, let's see more specifically at Norwegian black metal then. Okay, church burnings are a real thing. So of course I'm laughing at some of the police fantasies here, but of course there were 2 murder cases and there were 47 arson cases. Some of them of course turned out to be faulty electrical equipment and so on, but many of them were actually set on fire by young black metal fans. But what are these people interested in? Well, you can see a small little symbol over there, because both Hartweit and the police blame 2 very specific people for this satanic community showing up. Number 1 is of course Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, but Norwegian black metal fans really didn't like his version of Satanism, as you can see with the Anton LaVey Forbidden, no fun, no core, no mosh, no trends, from Death Like Silence Productions. Early on, Norwegian black metal fans had a need to distance themselves from LaVeyan Satanism, Church of Satan, the most common form of Satanism. They thought it was, by and large, too humanistic and too happy. It wasn't evil enough. Of course, Hartweit and the police say that LaVey, okay, he has an egotism in his philosophy, he has a materialism in his philosophy, and he himself might not have been that bad. Oh, but his fans, they are interpreting his stuff and as carte blanche to do whatever they want, and that's what leading to this kind of black magic, ritual, sexual abuse, and so on. So they say that he's not that bad, but his fans are terrible. The other guy is Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, with his Duata Wilt and the concept of Thelema, is of course very popular from the 70s on in countercultural circles. And Norwegian black metal fans are often very interested in occultism early on. And I myself have some involvement with the Ordo Templi Orientis and the Thelemic movement in Norway. And there I get to speak to some of the old guard, the guys who were involved heavily in the early 90s, when suddenly all of these black metal kids started showing up and being interested in this kind of stuff. And I've been told that a lot of them were disappointed and left early because they didn't think it was evil enough. Of course. But the police disagree, and Hartweit with his Deval Nonser book of course disagree and say that, like with LaVey, Crowley, he himself might not have been that bad, and his philosophy, if you read it correctly, might not be that bad, but a lot of people are reading it and using it as a carte blanche to be the bad Satanists out there who are sexually abusing children. So that's how the police are blaming both LaVey and Crowley for what's happening, while still not blaming them. While you can see the Norwegian black metal community are kind of distancing themselves from both of them because they aren't evil enough, they aren't dark enough, they aren't sexy enough. Which is interesting. And in my field, which is religious studies, we have a really interesting case for, okay, you guys have seen the X-Files, correct? Yes, good. If not, go home and watch it. There will be a test. Because when the X-Files first aired, something very interesting happened. Suddenly, we had a huge boom in UFO abduction experiences. And this is very interesting because earlier on we had the same thing with The Exorcist. When The Exorcist first aired, suddenly the Catholic Church had to hire more exorcists. And people were running down their doors saying, okay, I have a problem with a demon now. Okay, cool. So you have a very interesting response from different Christian groups in this period. Like One of the chief exorcists of the Catholic Church says that the Exorcist movie is a gift from God because it woke people up to the actual spiritual realities. While some of the Southern Baptist leaders in the United States says that the movie itself is possessed and might possess you. So it's a dark thing. My point here is that popular culture shapes what kind of explanations are available to us when we're trying to explain weird things happening, either in our psychology or in the world around us. And we can see that with The Exorcist, and we can see that with The X-Files. And with a lot of people, we have to blame Canada. The Satanic Panic has a long background, but what's considered the kind of starting shot for the modern Satanic Panic is the book Michelle Remembers. It was written by a specific psychiatrist from Canada that was doing, of course, regression therapy with his patient Michelle, a woman he later married. We can talk about the ethics about romancing and marrying your psychiatric patients in the future, but the whole point is that through regression therapy, she came out with all these stories with how her parents, how the mayor, how the president of the United States, and so on, all were parts of a satanic cult that had ritually abused her as a child, forced her to become pregnant and eat her aborted babies and so on. And they become millionaires from selling this book. They did tours, speaking tours everywhere. And later we got the McMartin preschool case. This is started with a single child that had a discussion with his mom. The mom later, we found out, suffered from bipolar disorder and psychosis. And she was terrified that her darling little boy had been sexually abused at this preschool. So she contacted the police, and the police decided to interview all of the children, but they didn't want to do that themselves. They outsourced the interview process to a private company that was mostly doing psychotherapy. And these psychotherapists were interviewing these kids, already believing in this kind of idea of satanic cults and so on. And so they got a huge amount of data material, where of course all of the children had reported in conversations, if the conversation lasted long enough and you pushed them enough, that they had been sexually abused. So they gave these tall tales about under the McMartin preschool, there were these long secret tunnels where the satanic cults were. And the chief Satanist was an action movie star from TV, and of course they also went on magical balloon rides and so on. So kind of tall tales that you can get from kids, you know? But this turned into the longest and most expensive court trial in American history. And of course, the duo that wrote Michelle Remembers were hired in as experts in court. So all of this stuff becomes normalized, becomes a part of the mainstream, and from that point on, it comes to Norway. And while this is happening in Norway and people are terrified of these satanic cults everywhere, then the black metal community shows up. And they're like, what the fuck is going on? What is happening here? And even people who said, like, okay, this is obviously hoax. And suddenly a dude shows up and says that he's a Satanist in national television. And he loves evil and so on. What are we doing about this? So you can understand the police confusion in the early 90s, but I'm still very surprised that this little book of ours was published in '98. I mean, it has a whole section warning about role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons. You'd think that was an 80s thing, you know? It feels out of date. But again, from this point on, you get more and more self-proclaimed experts showing up on television. What you see here is a self-proclaimed, formerly satanic high priest that ran what he called a satanic mafia with millions of members, until he found Jesus, of course, and repented, and then in the late 80s and early 90s made a series of incredibly humorous VHS tapes for police officers, training them on how to spot occult crimes. So here's his demonstrating how you can find pentagrams in the park. Wonderful. You can find a lot of his stuff on YouTube still. It's a beautiful watch. With that, I think I'm going to finish my little talk here. Me and a few colleagues are going to set up my little box of wonders here at the table over here. Please don't steal anything. I'm very, fond of my job and would like to keep it for a while longer. So if you can form a disorganized queue and come here, and I'll answer as many questions as we can find time for, and show the skull, some femurs, the tarot cards, and so on. I hope I didn't waste too much of your time. Thank you.
Veldig bra. Jeg setter veldig pris på å høre. Tusen takk.